So, starting off the conversation, what is your initial thought on how the Indians first reacted when Americans came?
I think they were confused. They probably never saw white people before, or people different than them, I should say, no matter what color they were, and probably a little defensive because this has been their way of life forever, and the land was theirs to roam as they chose. And now you have people coming in potentially, and they weren't sure of their motives, I guess.
Yeah. So when they came in, it's probably undoubtedly true that Americans wouldn't have survived the first couple of years without the Indians' help in showing them how to plant things there and how to fish and just where to do stuff. And some of like the mainstream people, like when most people think of America, like Christopher Columbus, he wasn't necessarily as good as a guy as most people say he was, I think. He definitely did a lot of weird stuff. You know a lot about the Indian mountains, right?
I like to think so. I mean, I'm very fascinated by this culture that built these mounds with their hands or tools that they made, and I think of all the hard work that went into that, and I also wonder the spiritual connection they had and what that was like for them, and what made them want to build these mounds and shapes of creatures is very interesting to me. Yeah. And that they, from what I understand, the way they buried their dead, not all mounds contain bodies, but that was their way of interring their loved ones, and why they did what they did with the shapes is interesting.
Yeah.
The serpents. There was the man mound down in the southern part of the state. That was really interesting. Different shapes of animals, things like that have some kind of meaning in how those people live their lives, and why they were put in maybe a panther versus a water spirit, or
Yeah. It's really interesting how they did things. Going more into like a few years after that, when this tension started to get aggressive, I believe the only reason we were able to beat them out at all, even though we had guns and they didn't, was the fact that they had lost 80% of their population to the virus that chickenpox, I think it was, or something like common flu.
I think there was a lot of
Something,
viruses
yeah.
that we brought to them and decimated their people.
Anybody who wasn't immune just got wiped out. You have all of these different tribes, and there was only a few of them that were like very harshly aggressive, but that was because we were still on their land. And when you got closer to the revolution, it gets more and more, they were aggressive because the British paid them to be. And other than that, it was them just defending themselves for their land.
And I think that people manipulated them too. They promised them things, and they trusted that their word was good, because that's probably how their society ran. That you didn't need to have anything signed because you gave your word in a handshake or however they did things. So I think that they trusted what was told to them, and they should have been able to trust. But again, I think they were manipulated because people aren't always honest, and I kind of wonder what it would have been like if the native tribes would have prevailed. What kind of world would that have been? Would there have been sections that if they allowed us to come to, if they were in control versus the way they were?
There could have been multiple situations. If they just stopped us from advancing, then they would have had their I think it was called the Pan United Indian Nation or whatever is what they called it. It was made by this one guy. His dad was I forget how he was killed, but originally his whole village was burnt down. He was then adopted by a war chief. That guy died, so he became like this war chief that created the Pan United Indian Nations. If they had succeeded, that probably would have just been like a country now. But if they pushed it really far, then they could have taken over all of America. And instead of white people being the great, like, the people with more, we just have more, there are more white people in America than there are Indians. It would be the other way around, where there's less white people than there is Indians. Because the Trail of Tears would have never happened. None of that stuff would have happened. So they would have stayed diverse, and they would either have kept their country like that, the Pan, or they would have split back into tribes.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, even between the tribes, there was some very strong behaviors.
There was a lot of strong. Some of them had bad emotions towards other ones.
Yeah.
There were some areas where they were all just kind of like neighbors, peaceful, but warring tribes. You get the idea of warring tribes, and Indians definitely did that a lot.
Yeah. And I think that as people, we do that within our own rights. I mean, you know, you look at even churches where people are supposed to believe the same thing, and there's so much division because somebody doesn't believe exact the way somebody else does, and now you have church splits, or you have companies do that too, where people don't agree on everything, and then you have a company split or sale. And I think as people, it's just, we're born into a lot of conflict always. Yeah.
And you bring it into nowadays, where a lot of the Indian people are treated more highly because of what their ancestors went through in the past. There's a lot more laws protecting them. Like, they're the only people who can open, I think it's kind of weird, but they're the only people who can open casinos. That was part of like their agreements with Americans. They have a lot of different rights on hunting stuff. They can hunt stuff anywhere. And they have different like rights in court.
I didn't know that.
Because a lot of the times the judge will side with the Indians, which is weird. But if you're wondering how I know this, my grandpa's friend is married to an Indian, and she tells a lot of stories to him and how everything works. There's also a lot of Indians buried a lot of like treasures near the coast of America. So whenever they find these treasures underneath trees and stuff, they can claim that land. Because it's technically like historically theirs or whatever. So they can take it. But that's kind of how things are now, versus then where they had hundreds of thousands to millions of people, and now there's just, you'll find like maybe a couple hundred in each state if you're lucky. Some states don't have any.
And I think here in Wisconsin, we pushed them all on these reservations, which, I'm glad that they had some tracts of land. But if you think back to the way it was, I mean, they had free reign. There was no such thing as hunting licenses. They hunted because they needed to feed their families. And I think just in general, population did that. We didn't need to regulate, and then people started getting greedy and wanting to just poach or whatever they're doing. But back to the mounds too, I think that there's more regulation now. Even when mounds are found on private land, and the tribe tries to work with the people to make sure it doesn't get destroyed, because I don't know what the numbers were, but there was a gentleman by the name of Increase Lapham that surveyed a lot of the mounds like back in the 1800s, and a lot of them were destroyed. I think like it's 80% of the mounds that were created were actually destroyed by the plow. When we came and started planting crops, and people would say they would find, Indian points in their fields, and they were angry about it when, we should have been appreciating the people that came before us and what they did to survive.
If it wasn't them, we never would have developed corn the way we did. and we never would have like found a way to be established here.
Yeah, like you said early on, they helped us.
Yeah.
They were very kind to us. And then I feel like, you know, not all of the Europeans that came, obviously, I think there was a lot of Europeans that came and had very good relations with the native peoples. Like I think of probably Lane, but going back to Laura Ingalls and her books, I mean, she wrote firsthand accounts about how they had some friends that were natives and that they were very close. They were all very close to each other. So I think that, you know, life on the frontier like that, you know, there were a lot of friendly relations, but it was the government that came in and became bullyish about doing this big land grab. Yeah.
They sold land that wasn't theirs.
Yeah, that's exactly what
because they believed that the Indians were not recognized as countries or like their own territories, so they knew that they could claim that land as theirs without any other countries interfering and just sell it.
Yes, that's valid. Yeah. So, bottom line comes down to the money again, doesn't it? It's all about money. It's always about who gets richer, no matter the cost, which is human life, unfortunately, for the native tribes. And like you said, the diseases, the amount of people that died because of the diseases that were brought over, and yes, and the Trail of Tears. How awful was that? I mean, how heartless would you have had to been to watch these people that were starving walk across virtually half the nation? Yeah, very sad. I think Oklahoma is kind of where they ended up. They put a lot of reservations
Oklahoma,
out there.
I think some in Indiana. I may be wrong.
Sure, yeah. I know Oklahoma for sure. But the land there was all dusty.
Yeah.
They couldn't grow anything, so they gave them this land that was not even
good.
No, and it was all dusty and dry. There was probably no woods for them to hunt and sustain their families. Pretty sad.
Sad. So that'll be the point we end on. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.